Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we are going to learn how to create a Docker image and then how to push the Docker image into Amazon ECR using Azure DevOps pipeline. So let's try to understand more about what we are trying to do. So this is exactly what we are trying to achieve. So I do have my Springboot application. The source code is set up in GitHub. So this is my Springboot application. And we are going to build Azure DevOps pipeline. Basically the build pipeline, which is going to check out the code, build the jar file, build the Docker image, and then push the Docker image into ECR. So this is what we are trying to achieve. All right, so let's look at the demo item. So if you see here, we need to have AWS toolkit for Azure DevOps, because in order for Azure DevOps to integrate with the AWS cloud, we need to install this AWS toolkit. And then this is my sample application, which we already talked about. So how are we going to achieve that? So the way we are going to accomplish this is, we need to create a repository in Amazon ECR, and then we are going to create an IAM user, and I'm going to provide him this particular policy so that he can push the image into ECR. And then we are going to create access keys, right? We are going to create access key for that particular user. Using that, we will create service connections in Azure DevOps so that the ADO can integrate with ECR. And then we will create a build pipeline, and then we will create some variables, add all the required tasks like maven task for building the jar file, and then Docker build task for building the Docker image, and then ECR push task for pushing the Docker image into ECR. And then we will save the configuration, run the pipeline, and then we will just verify just to make sure that the image got uploaded into ECR or not. Okay, it's a very simple use case. Awesome. So let's get started. So if you look at here, so these are the things we are going to achieve, right? I already kind of ran through one by one. Okay. All right. So let's look at here. So we need to have Azure DevOps account set up. So that this is my Azure DevOps account. Okay, so this is my Azure DevOps dashboard. I have created, this particular project. So this is where we are going to create a pipeline. So we are going to use this Azure DevOps project. And then we need to install AWS toolkit for Azure DevOps. So this is kind of a plugin which Azure DevOps is going to use in order to authenticate or in order to access AWS services. So this is going to provide you a bunch of tasks for us in order to integrate with most of the AWS services out there. Okay, so you can just click on get it free, and then you can install as part of your Azure DevOps plugins. Wonderful. And then this is my Springboot app. We already talked about that. And then we need to create a service connection in order to authenticate with GitHub, because this is where I have configured my project. But in order for a ADO to check out from GitHub, we need to create a service connection. I have already created the service connection as part of here. So you can go to project settings. If you look at service connections, so I have already created my GitHub service connection in order to authenticate with GitHub. So you would be using something called personal access token as part of authenticating from ADO into GitHub. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So why don't we get started here? So we need to create a repository first in ECR. So let me go here. So I'm going to click on get started. So let's create a new repository here. So I'm going to say my Springboot app. You can give any name, but let's give this particular name since my application is Springboot based. Okay. Let's click on create repository. Wonderful. So now I have created this repository in ECR. Wonderful. And then the next step is, let's see here. So we need to go ahead and then create an IAM user. Okay. So I'm going to go into AWS Cloud, select IAM, click on users. So I already have one created, but let me quickly create another one. So I'm going to say, let's call this as ECR push. Okay, so I don't want to give him AWS management console access for this particular user. I don't want to, because I'm going to use this user just to push the image, right? It's kind of a service user, you can say. So click on next. So I have already created a group called ECR group, so I can add that user to that particular group. This particular group has this particular policy, right? So you need to have this user definitely needs to have this particular policy. Okay, so I'm going to click on next and then create user. So wonderful. So our user got created. So click on ECR push. Okay, wonderful. So now the way Azure DevOps is going to authenticate with AWS Cloud is, we need to create some kind of a keys. So go to security credentials, and then I'm going to click on create access key. Okay, so I'm going to use other. So I know it's going to say that it's okay, so that this is fine. So we don't want to share, this particular keys with anyone. So please remember that. So this is just to provide any tag value, but that's fine. I'm going to say this is for ECR push from ADO create access key. So there you go, ECR. So our access key and secret key got created. So we are going to use this in order to authenticate from ADO into ECR. Okay, so awesome. That's fine. So I'm not going to show my secret access key. So let me go into the next step here. So pretty much we are done with here. So the next step would be we need to go ahead and then create a service connection in ADO. Okay. All right. So how do you do that? So let's go to our project settings here. Click on use service connection. So we are going to select AWS here and then click on next. So this is where we are going to provide the access key and secret key. So let me go to my AWS console. So this is the access key. So provide that, and then this is the secret key. I'm going to copy this one. I'm not going to show that. Okay. We don't have to provide the rest of the information. Why? Because they're all optional. So let's give some name. I'm gonna give my AWS connection con. Okay, and you can select this one and then say save. So that's it, right? So our connection got created. So right here, wonderful. Let me go back to the instructions. So if you kind of look for the steps. So we are done with this, done with this, done with this. We also did this as well. The next step would be, go ahead and then create the pipeline. Okay. All right. So let's get started here. So let me go to pipeline. So click on new pipeline. So you have so many options, right? So let's start with the classic editor. Okay. So I'm going to create a pipeline without YAML file. So let's choose this one. And where is our code? Our code is in GitHub. So since I already, authenticated with GitHub, so that's the reason why it is kind of showing me. You see here, right? It's already authorized. So I'm going to go ahead and then select the repository. So the repository name is Springboot app. So there you go. So this is this one. Click on select, and that is the branch name. So we are good with that. Click on continue. Okay. So now we have to choose the template. So what I'm going to do, since we are building the Docker image and then pushing the Docker image, so why don't I search for Docker? So there you go. So we are going to use this particular template, and then we will customize our pipeline. So click on apply. Okay, wonderful. So now we just need to configure our pipeline. So let's fix one by one. So the first thing is, it is asking for the agent. So it is recommended to use a non-Windows agent. Okay, so we are going to go with Ubuntu latest. For some reason, if you are building a Docker image using Windows agent, it is not working. Maybe you have to install Docker on that Windows build agent. But when you use Ubuntu, I did not see any problem. So I'm going to go with the Ubuntu agent. Okay. So now before we get started here, we need to create some variables. So let's go to variables tab, add couple of variables. So I want to have my image name variable, and then I'm going to name this as Springboot app. Okay, and then I want to add one more variable for our repo name. So that repo name is actually gonna come from here, ECR. Let's go to ECR repositories. So this is the repository name. So I'm going to copy the repo name from ECR. Wonderful. So let's add that. Okay. So don't get confused. I know they're all very close. So this is a image name and this is a repo name. Okay. Wonderful. So we are good with that. Go to task. So this is where we have to add and all the task, right? So since our Spring Boot app is obviously based on Java, we already have pom.xml file and all. So the first thing is we need to build the jar file, because if you look at the Docker file, you see here, right? So this needs to have a jar file created. So that is actually part of the Docker file, right? So this will be part of the Docker image. So we need to build the jar file. So let me go here. I'm going to add a task called maven. Select that one. Okay, and then we have to move this up. So drag this all the way to the top. Okay. So this is good because our pom.xml file is in the root of the folder. So we are good with that. And I'm going to add a goal install. Super, perfect. So now we have to add this task, customize this task for building the Docker image. So what we are going to do is, if you look at the task version, so unfortunately, this has the older version. So I'm going to use 2.0 or 2. Star. So it's like a latest task. Okay. So now we are going to build the Docker image, right? So this task is for building the Docker image. So I'm going to leave everything empty. So that's fine. Container repository. So this is where I'm going to pass my image name, right? So I'm going to say over here repo name, right? So I'm going to use an image name here. Okay. And then we are going to use a build task. Okay, so select build task, and then so Docker file is very much part of the that particular root folder. So we are good with that. We don't have to modify that. Okay, and then it is asking for the tag. So how it should be tagging. Okay, so I think this is actually good. Okay, so I think we don't have to worry about anything now. I think this should be good, but let me quickly go to the step. I just want to make sure we have everything correct. I have already captured the screenshots and everything. So let's go here. There you go. You see here, right? So we have to pass on the image name over here, and the command is build, and then the tag is build.build id. Okay. I think we are good over there. Okay. And then let's go to the next task. So unfortunately, we cannot use this task because you don't see any option here. You see here, right? There is no way we can connect to ECR over here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this task, and then I'm going to add another task here. I'm going to say, you see this one, right? We're going to look for ECR push, or you can also search here ECR. When you do that, this task is going to pop up. So let's select that one. Okay, so we are going to use this one. So when you go here, when you select the drop down, do you see this one? So this is actually coming from service connections. If you remember, we have added AWS IAM user over here, right? The access key and secret key. So we are going to use that connection to authenticate with AWS. And then it is asking for AWS region. So if you actually see here, I am under US East 1. So I'm going to go ahead and then select that one from here. Let's see. Okay, perfect. And then it is asking for, okay, so tell me your source image, right? So let's select image ID. So we have to fill in this information, the source image ID. So if you see the way we are building, right? So we are using the image name and then the build ID, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass on these two over here. And then colon, and then I'm going to pass on this as well, like that. Okay, and then where are we going to push our image? So we are going to push into our repository. So if you remember, I have already added a variable name called repo name. Okay, so which is nothing but this one, right? So this is where I want to upload my Docker image. Okay, so that is that. Okay, perfect. And then the target repository tag. So if you see here, the way we are tagging, so we are tagging like this. So how we want to tag our Docker images before we push. So yeah, we don't want to use the latest tag. So let's tag it with our build ID. So that is this one. So this is provided by Azure DevOps itself. So you're gonna see the build ID. Okay. And then if you want to check this option, so this is fine. Okay, force repository name to follow Docker naming convention. So that's fine. I think that's pretty much over there. So why don't we save this and then find out what's going on? So click on save and queue. So like I said, we are going to use Ubuntu or any non-Windows. Okay, don't use Windows, but we are going to go with in our case, we're going to go with the Ubuntu. Okay, so click on save and run. All right, let's see. So build started running. So if you see here, currently it is in the process of building the Docker image. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so it is also in the process of pushing the Docker image right now. Wow. Wow, so this is done. Okay, so if you look at the build task here, you see here, right? So this is how it is going to tag. Okay, the image name is like this, image name, and then it is tagging with the build ID. So that's the build ID. And then if you see here, so that is what we are kind of pushing, right? So if you see here, look at this one. Okay, you see here, right? So it says that adding tag. So this is our ECR UI information, right? So it is tagging for the image what we just built in the previous step, and then it is tagging to this one, and before it pushes this image into ECR. Okay, so that's very important. Okay, wonderful. So how do you verify? Let's go into ECR. Let's click on the repo name. Wow, there you go. Do you all see here, guys? So we were able to, build the Docker image and then push the Docker image. So as you can see here, like 30 seconds ago, right? So yeah, so this is how, guys, this is how you can create a classic pipeline and then push the Docker image for your Springboot application. So now, why don't we try the same thing using YAML pipeline? Okay, so this is also very easy. So how do you do that? So let's go to pipelines and click on new pipeline. Okay, since our source code is in GitHub, let's select GitHub. And we are going to select our repository. So choose this one. Okay, so here we have to choose our task, right? Or choose our kind of a template. So let's go with this one for now. Build a Docker image, because if you look at here, if you click on show more, I don't see there are any more templates, right, related to Docker. So let's go with this one, build a Docker image, and then we will customize anyway, right? So let's click on this one, and it is asking where the Docker file resides. So it is actually part of the root folder over there, right? So right here. So we are good with that. So let's select validate and configure. That's fine. Okay, so now this has created. So as you know, we have to build the jar file, isn't it? So why don't we do one thing? Let's first add the task, the maven task. So what I'm going to do, click on show assistant here. Let me search for maven. Click on maven. So let's provide the goal as install. So we have already done all these things, in the classic pipeline. So that's pretty much over there. We don't have to touch anything. Okay. Of course, if you want to integrate with SonarQube or Jacoco, you can do all of that. Okay. So that is out of scope for this particular video. So click on add. Okay. So our task has been added here. So this is for Maven build. Wonderful. And then this one is for building the Docker image. Okay. So let me check a couple of things here. Okay. So if you see here, we need to use the variables, right? So that's what we have used in our classic pipeline. So go to variables. Let's add those two variables here. So I'm going to say image name, and then I'm gonna say okay, ours is Springboot. I'm gonna say Springboot app, and then I'm going to add one more variable. So click on plus. Let's add one more variable called repo name, and then this is our repo name, right? So that is this one. So let's add that as well. Click on OK. So there you go. As you can see here, so I have added these two variables. Click on save. Wonderful. So now if you see here, the way we are going to tag, okay, so the tagging is important. So if you see here, it says that if you see here, this already created a variable called tag, so it has added the build ID as part of that. So that's good. So we have to add our image name over here. So let me say repository, and then if you remember, we have to pass on that image name over here. Okay, wonderful. So this should be fine. Okay, very good. So now the next task is we have to push the image into ECR. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back here. So let me add another task. So that is this one, Amazon ECR push. So let me click on this one. So we need to select our AWS credentials. So that is this one. My AWS region is US East 1. Okay, perfect. And then let's select image ID. So it is asking for the source image ID. I think we all know that. So source image ID is going to be something like this. So if you remember, so this is how we have built our image ID, right? Image earlier. So I'm going to say like this, and then I'm going to use this tag like that. Okay, perfect. And then it is asking for target repository name. So I think we all know that. We also created a variable for that. We have stored in this particular variables over here. I think you can see that over here. So that's the variables, right? Okay. And then it is asking for how do you tag before you push. So we need to use this particular tag. Okay. We don't want to tag with the latest, as part of that, right? We don't want to use like latest as part. We don't want to use latest for tag. We need to have a proper tag. So we are going to pass the build ID for that. Okay, so that is that for that. Okay, so I think we are good with that. And then let's go with this option. I think that's pretty much over there. Okay, so AWS connection, region information, image ID. This is the source image information along with the tag, target repository name, and then how the image should be tagged before we push. Wonderful. So let me make sure I'm in the right place. So click on add. There you go. So as you can see here, everything has been added here. So we have 3 different tasks. One for building the jar file, another one for building the Docker image, and then another one for pushing the Docker image into ECR. Wonderful. Okay, so let me do save and run. Save. Okay, so it is in the process of creating the pipeline right now. Okay, very good. So click on build. Okay, so right now it is in the process of pushing the Docker image into ECR. Wow. Okay, so let's quickly check here. So as you can see here, this was successfully build the image, and then this also tagged the image as well, as you can see here. And then this is for pushing the Docker image into ECR. So as you can see here, before pushing, it is doing this tagging, just like we talked about. Okay, so now if I go into ECR, if I say refresh, wow, there you go. You see here, guys. So we were able to, see the Docker image got pushed into ECR as well. All right, folks, that's how you would build a Docker image and then push the Docker image into ECR using Azure DevOps pipeline. Thank you for watching this video.